Good day to you, and welcome to a new Nashville Masterclass. I am your host, James Prosophony, and I haven't been doing much lately. Long COVID, very long COVID, just keeps going and making everything I do in life difficult. But now, I think I'm ready to start putting out a video every single day because I'm getting way behind, and the idiots of YouTube are just collecting subscribers hand over fist. Some of you people just like utter shit. Crap. But that's okay because I'll serve you more of it. Today we're going to discuss fentanyl. Can you overdose just by touching it? Just by being in proximity? All these stories you hear of deputy nearly dies of fentanyl overdose, ODing after brushing powder off his shirt, school children dying in the classrooms with their classmates all passing out because they are in proximity to fentanyl. Is this true? No, it's not. Not at all. Now, another thing I want to point out is I write down a lot of notes because there's a lot of dates, names that I have to keep up with. And a lot of the YouTube videos and channels I've seen that have to do with drugs, a lot of time you will see just pictures and not the actual host until he says, and remember to like and subscribe. And then he goes back to the pictures. All he's doing is just reading off of Google. He doesn't know any of the stuff he's talking about. And a lot of times, him or her, I've heard them mispronounce normal words like medical instead of easy things like that. Methaqualone, methaqualone. And they're just regurgitating what they read off of somebody else's work. They can't write out their own thing and do their own research. You know who I'm talking about. But not here, ladies and gentlemen. Nay, good sir. Nay, good ma'am. Not on my channel. Now, I mean, you have to look up other people's writings unless you're a doctor or a pharmacologist or a toxicologist yourself. But it's one thing to look up information and then write about it. It's another thing to just read off someone else's work. But let's dive into the fentanyl debacle. Now, doctors and toxicologists warn that it's virtually impossible to overdose simply by touching or getting too close to fentanyl. Now, the hype around this perceived threat is harming taxpayers, first responders, and overdose victims. Accidental overdose by skin exposure is, and I quote, chemically and physically impossible, says Dr. Ryan Marino, a medical toxicologist and addiction medicine specialist at Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine. Dr. Andrew Stolbeck, an ER physician and medical toxicologist at Johns Hopkins, says it's not possible to overdose on fentanyl by touching it. If it was absorbed well through the skin, people wouldn't inject it and snort it in order to get high. Now, I have to disagree with Dr. Andrew Stolbeck because, well, let's take heroin or Oxycontin. You can just eat it and get high, but people still inject it and snort it. So even if it was completely possible to get high just by holding fentanyl, no one would do it because it would be so much quicker and stronger to snort or inject it. Let's continue. Now, people are facing serious legal troubles, such as assault and endangerment of police officers for supposedly causing these impossible overdoses. A Mr. Justin Buckle was arrested on May 12, 2017 in East Liverpool, Ohio, after just being released from jail. He was pulled over, and another officer named Officer Chris Green, who was off duty, decided he would join the fracas because I guess they just get off on doing stuff like that. They searched his car and found some powder that later tested positive for fentanyl. Mr. Buckle even told them that the powder might have fentanyl in it. An hour later, off-duty Officer Green complained he didn't feel well. He had brushed some powder off his shirt. Now, quick question. How did you get powder on your shirt? It wasn't as if this was 2 pounds of fentanyl and you tore open the bag and it flung on your shirt. No, this was a tiny amount. And even to test it, all you have to do is hold it, dip some out, and place it on the testing kit. No, the only way you got powder on your shirt was snorting it. And, hell, you can sue me all you want, you know good and well. That's the only way you got powder on your shirt. I don't know. I wasn't there, but can you think of a better way or easier way he got powder on his shirt? That's all I've got to say about that. Now, police documents read that Officer Green became saturated in sweat and was barely coherent. Officer Green remembers panicking, trying to talk, and falling forward, and then nothing else. And he was treated for an overdose. Oh my God. Mike DeWine, the governor of Ohio, who was Attorney General at the time, said fentanyl is so dangerous that even the slightest exposure can be deadly. Mr. Governor DeWine later claimed that Officer Green's OD was a documented medical incident and that it was factually incorrect that his overdose was medically incorrect. That's what he said. It just shows how when people are faced with the fact that they were wrong, that they would just keep pushing their narrative. Even though they know that they have been proven wrong, they're just going to keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. A study by the Harm Reduction Journal last year showed that stories of accidental fentanyl exposure made up 150 media reports in 2017 alone. Media reports increased in 2016 after the DEA issued a warning that said fentanyl can be absorbed through the skin or through accidental inhalation of airborne powder. They later took down the video they posted to YouTube. Now, a few months after Mr. Buckle's arrest, the cops showed blue bloods, showed an officer being rushed to the hospital after touching fentanyl. 8 million people saw this. So, this is how these lies are spread through America and the world of any subject. People see a show or read a story and they take it as fact. Whether they know or not, a lot of people want to believe that they are dubious and taking everything they read and see as literal, but they do. It's inside of their subconscious, and when faced with this in conversation, the only thing they have to go by is what they've seen on these shows, and all of a sudden, they just, God, I hate when I do this. They just keep pushing the lies that they heard because they want to be right, like everybody does. So this kind of thing is pushed into people's minds and they start to believe it. So here's some questions that will make you think, why don't nurses or drug dealers overdose on this all of the time? And don't say because they're wearing gloves, aren't cops supposed to be wearing gloves? Yeah, nurses wear more protective clothing and garments than cops do when doing when handling these powders, but they don't accidentally overdose. Drug dealers don't accidentally overdose. Not roommates or family members of addicts just all of a sudden overdose. They don't. It doesn't happen. But it seems that they would come in contact with this powder a lot more than the police would. But police and EM workers are just falling out left and right. Ryan McNeil, an assistant professor of medicine and public health at Yale University, said the descriptions of suspected overdoses sound more like panic attacks, not toxicity. It's galling that we're treating this as an overdose when it's not even how an overdose presents. In August, I think everybody here will remember this, San Diego County Sheriff's Department released a video of Deputy David Fava, falling to the ground dramatically after touching a powder. Everybody saw this. But this time, over 400 medical professionals signed a letter demanding a retraction of major news outlets that echoed the department's claims, citing a 2017 study by the American College of Medical Toxicology and the American Academy of Clinical Toxicology task force that found incidental dermal absorption is very unlikely to cause opiate toxicity. Toxicity cannot occur from simply being in proximity to the drug. The department later admitted the deputy never underwent a toxicology screening for fentanyl. On September 16th, Mr. Tommy Starnes was charged with 2 felony counts of reckless endangerment in Greene County, Tennessee, after a deputy and EMS worker both experienced symptoms of an overdose after treating him. Now, Mr. Starnes was just being treated for an overdose. He wasn't dealing. They didn't catch him doing any crime. They were there to save his life. But instead, he was charged with 2 felonies. Greene County Sheriff Wesley Holt wore a hazmat suit at the scene to recover the evidence. The Tennessee Highway Patrol flew in decontamination equipment by helicopter. Holt estimated the cost was around $3,800 to the taxpayer, and none of that didn't need to happen at all. He also, of course, declined to say if the deputy and EMS worker or Starnes were given a toxicology screening. Sheriff Holt rejects the idea that these reactions to fentanyl are because of an anxiety attack or the nocebo effect. The nocebo being the opposite of the placebo, where the placebo you feel positive reactions to the drug in a way it's supposed to work. The nocebo effect is where you feel negative effects of nothing. So if you threw some powder on somebody and told them it was a abrasive base and was going to burn their skin off, they'd probably start screaming and brushing it off, even though nothing was really happening. And like Sheriff Holt, ex-officer Chris Green from East Liverpool, Ohio, turns a blind eye to medical professionals and their study. He is no longer a police officer, being terminated after several violations in an investigation ordered by East Liverpool Mayor Gregory Bricken. In his, he was terminated after violations, including dishonesty and discourteous treatment of the public. Keith Humphreys, professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at Stanford, believes that the resistance to the facts of fentanyl exposure isn't just an issue with first responders or police. The big concern are with prosecutors. They could just be glad to have another way to charge people, and that's certainly true. Prosecutors don't care, well, no lawyer does, about right or wrong. How many cases do you hear about loopholes and this happening? Let's see, you can drug many women and rape them, but if there is a, what did they say it was? It was if you get released on a technicality, then anything and everything you did is okay. There are so many guilty people in the world that get away with whatever, and there's a lot of people that are completely innocent that get locked up. We hear it all the time. It has nothing, American law has nothing to do with right or wrong and justice. It does not. It has to do with how well your lawyer presents a case. There are so many horrible people in the world, and because of the way their tale is spun, they get away with whatever. And it goes with substances too. Fentanyl is demonized, even though it's not the strongest of the opioids. It's been used for decades and decades and decades, but it wasn't abused until America and the world created its own drug problem with the war on drugs. If drugs were legalized, we wouldn't have any of these problems. But let's stay on track. Fentanyl cannot cause an overdose by you touching it. You would have to walk through a veritable cloud of fentanyl to overdose by inhaling it. These stories are categorically untrue, and the police, EMS workers, and prosecutors are using this to charge people unjustly, just because it looks good to them. They made another arrest. I don't know what it does for the EMS worker other than they're just looking for some sympathy, because it's just not true, and they should know better. Most doctors know better, but the facts are here, and the longer people believe it and just turn a blind eye, the longer this kind of stuff goes on. So now you know, you're educated better than that. Don't let, if you're an addict and you know you have fentanyl around, don't let something like this happen to you. If the cops try that crap, you can watch this, listen to the names I say and Google them and get in touch with them. There's so many different people and studies that you can cite to fight the case. I am at a loss for words a lot of time because I'm trying to think of the perfect terminology. My lexicon is quite big, but I can never grab the word I want whenever. But I wanted to put this video out because I don't want this to continue happening. I want people to know that they don't have to let this kind of thing happen to them. And when you hear stories of this happening, know better. Push back, because they will continue to push this false negative as long as they possibly can, because it's within their benefit, not yours. I'll see you guys tomorrow as I dig up some more crap to talk about. You have a wonderful day. If you're having a hard time, there's nothing else you can do but hang on. There's a life outside of addiction. It is not easily attainable, but it is there, and it's a lot easier than back in my day in the early 2000s when no one cared about you. There's a lot more resources. So I hope you guys have a good one, and I will talk with you tomorrow.